A much anticipated witness, the former president's son is said to have facilitated meetings between the Gupta family and senior government officials. Duduzane Zuma was first fingered by former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas. Jonas alleged that Zuma drove him to the Gupta Saxonwold home in October 2015.
The meeting was arranged by Duduzane Zuma, and after long messages and calls requesting to see me, so I eventually agreed to see him. We were supposed to meet. I thought it was a meeting with him on the message. When I arrived at the venue for our meeting, which was at Hyatt Hotel.
Now you continue to answer that question on line number 23.
At Hyatt, he suggested that after almost like talking things that were not very clear, and I was getting irritated, I said, "Chief, I'm rushing to the plane." So he said, "No, there are other people that we have to meet. You have to meet."
Jonas testified that he was offered 600 million by the Guptas to take over as finance minister from Nene and work with them.
The president was going to fire Mr. Nene because he could not work with them, which I understood to reference to the Gupta family. He said that, I quote, "You must understand that we are in control of everything," unquote. The National Prosecuting Authority, the Hawks, the National Intelligence Agency, and the old men do, and I quote, "will do anything we tell him to do." He said that the old man intended appointing me as the Minister of Finance. I was at this stage shocked and angered by this statement, and I said that I was not interested in becoming a Minister of Finance.
Former ANC MP Vytie Mentor testified that Zuma introduced her to Rajesh Gupta and Fanahlongwane while on a flight to China.
When I was aboard the flight to Dubai, a certain young man who was accompanied, who was not alone, knocked at the cubicle at my cubicle and introduced himself as Duduzane. I must say that there was a time, at that time, what I could remember very vividly was Zuma, and there was a time when I was Duduzane was not important, but what stuck with my mind was Zuma.
Mentor later admitted to have identified the man incorrectly as Hlongwane. Former Minister Manqoba Mchunu also detailed his interaction with Zuma. He told the commission that the former president's son tried to get him to meet the Gupta family during his tenure as Mineral Resources Minister.
He wanted me to explain to AJ Gupta that I did not badmouth them. That's what he said to me was the purpose of the meeting. My own reflection is that they'd been trying to meet me for a long time and I was refusing. So they had to create a story and hoping that maybe I would then go and meet this fellow called AJ Gupta.
Duduzane Zuma is set to take the stand at 10 a.m. to present his version of events. SABC News, Johannesburg.
Manqoba Mchunu is here with us to discuss the State Capture Commission. A very good morning to you. So far, so good. What has been happening?
Well, of course, as we do expect, the much anticipated testimony of Duduzane Zuma. Of course, he's another key player in the alleged state capture. Of course, the fact that, first of all, he's the president's or the former president's son, and his close proximity with the Gupta brothers, who were his business partners. And so the allegations are that, of course, he was one of those people who would set up meetings between the Gupta brothers as well as cabinet members. Of course, you'll know that one of the terms of reference of the state capture Capture Commission is to see whether there is any veracity in the claims that were made by the former Deputy Finance Minister Mcebisi Jonas, as well as Vytie Mentor, that they were actually offered cabinet positions by the Gupta brothers. And that's where Duduzane Zuma really comes in, because the information is that he was the one that actually set up those meetings between the Gupta brothers and these cabinet members. You recall that when Mcebisi Jonas took the stand, he did allude to the fact that it was in fact Duduzane Zuma that had set up the meeting with the Guptas, and that in 2015, in October, he's the one that actually had transported him to the Gupta compound, or that went with him to the Gupta compound. And of course, he says at the time, that's where, when he arrived there at the Gupta compound from Netlek at Hyatt Hotel in Rosebank, that's where they were initially, when they went to the Gupta compound. He says when he arrived there, that's where AJ Gupta then offered him that 600 million rand bribe and 600,000 on the spot, and a cabinet position as finance minister, only if he would work with them. And of course, we do know that Duduzane Zuma later denied those allegations. He does agree to the fact that he did take Mcebisi Jonas to the Gupta compound, but he says that the reason why he took him is because he wanted him to clear, some sort of an allegation that was made of blackmail between him and Fana Hlongwane. So he says that was the only reason why Mcebisi Jonas went there. And he says he went there willingly. He knew that he was going to the Gupta compound. Of course, you'll recall that Duduzane Zuma did file an affidavit with the State Capture Commission and later cross-examined Mcebisi Jonas on his evidence. So he says there was nothing untoward and he was not involved, and he didn't hear anything about a bribe being offered to Mcebisi Jonas. But of course, it doesn't end there. There are two other witnesses that also implicated him, that being Vytie Mentor, the former ANC MP, as well as Manqoba Mchunu.
So, we know that his dad has previously said, just because I have a son and he has business interest does not imply that it's improper. Do we expect Duduzane to come up and say, I've never been a public servant? Us just like any other aspiring business person trying to secure deals?
Well, of course, we do expect the Commission to really get, deep into his relationship with the Gupta and some of their dealings, and whether or not really did he use his, proximity to his father to influence certain deals, to sway certain departments, to grant deals to the Gupta family. Thinking back to the issue of Manqoba Mchunu, when he testified, of course, he said that Duduzane Zuma had tried to set up several meetings with him just 6 months after being appointed as the Mineral Resources Minister in 2014. So he says Duduzane Zuma had tried to set up meetings between him and AJ Gupta, and at the time, he says Duduzane Zuma had really claimed that, he wanted him to clear the air with AJ Gupta because apparently there was some sort of a rumor that was going around that Manqoba Mchunu had bad-mouthed the Gupta brothers, his business partners, he says. So he says he tried to get me to this meeting, but I refused to go to that meeting. So we're really going to get deep to understand just how, if at all, did Duduzane Zuma use the influence and his proximity with his father to sway certain deals. We later understood that, of course, through Manqoba Mchunu's evidence that, Duduzane Zuma might have wanted, him to meet the Guptas just to speak on their mining interests. Yeah.
Do we know how many or which people might be implicated by today's testimony?
Well, I think there's more than anything. I think Duduzane Zuma's role is to really clear the air, and in terms of give his side of the story, because remember, there are already allegations. Vytie Mentor, for example, also mentioned the fact that she was introduced to the Gupta brothers by Duduzane on a flight to China via Dubai. And she says that he's the one that came to her cubicle and knocked and introduced her to these two Indian-looking people, which she later identified as Rajesh and AJ. So with regards to that, I mean, we're going to hear more testimony what really happened and whether or not he was involved in actually, trying to, in one way or the other, enable the Gupta brothers to speak to these people and offer them employment, and whether or not he was actually involved in all of this, the allegations of bribery, the allegation of offering cabinet members positions, whether he knew about these things. So it will really delve deep into really his relationship with the Guptas and whether or not that was used somehow to benefit the Gupta family.
So it starts at 10 a.m. this morning?
It starts at 10 a.m. and of course we do know that the are people that have come out, like the BLF, in support to say Duduzane must be given a fair chance to give his side of the story at the commission. But as far as whether we'll see some of them, that's not clear for now. And whether we'll see his father, the former President Jacob Zuma, also not clear.
Who's
we know that
been supportive of
he's
his son.
always been supportive. You recall when he went to court in Randburg, he's been behind him, and vice versa. Duduzane also coming when Zuma was giving testimony. So we're yet to see whether that will happen.
So we'll watch and see. Thank you so much. Manqoba Mchunu will be bringing us all those details as soon as the State Capture Commission process starts this morning. Thank you again.